Guys, welcome to the Vlad Catcher Show, the #1 show for founders, execs, and entrepreneurs who are scaling their businesses. This video is presented by Salesforce.com, and we have an amazing interview for you today with their VP of AI, Nancy Xu, about how she is building AI agents. Nancy, welcome to the show.
Vlad, thanks for having me. It's so great to see you.
Well, Nancy, you have a bachelor's and a master's degree from Stanford, and you were in a PhD program in computer science at Stanford, and you were a valedictorian of your high school. I mean, you just have such an incredible resume and such a great career. Can you tell us what was your journey like from the time you finished college until today?
Sure. Very, very happy to be on the show. First of all, Vlad, thanks so much for having me. You know, Let me first start by saying when I got into AI, Vlad, it wasn't this hot thing that everyone, talks about today. Um, I actually went into college thinking I was going to become a math professor. When I was much younger, been on the US math team, and I sort of always had this vision that math is the foundational language for understanding the physical world. And if you wanted to make an impact, you should really use math as a way to drive it. Now, what changed though is in 2015, I saw the very famous AlphaGo competition that we've all heard about before. And I remember looking at that and thinking, wow, this is so awesome. It just was this moment for me where I realized if math was the language for understanding the physical world, AI was going to be the language through which we understand intelligence. And that for me was a very pivotal moment. You asked about what I did, after college. So I've been working on AI research now for almost 10 years, less so research nowadays, but previously. And I worked at FAIR, so Facebook's AI research lab, in the early days, working on some of their core vision models. And then briefly at a company called Akasa, so an early stage startup in the healthcare industry, really in what I would consider to be like an early iteration of an agentic company. And at Acasa, we built AI agents in the healthcare space. I later went back to Stanford for my PhD. And when I was there, I worked on some of the core research and was very lucky to have started a lot of the core research in AI agents out of Stanford in the lab. Flash forward to today, in 2022, we're working on research on AI agents, and I basically got to a point where it felt like we had invented electricity, but no one had built a light bulb, to take the metaphor. And if you looked around, we were building these models in the lab that were pushing on PhD plus levels of intelligence, but no company was actually using AI, right? Or like agentic AI at the level that I had sort of imagined. And so in 2022, I started this company called MoonHub to build AI agents for enterprises. We worked on several use cases, predominantly in recruiting. And then in just earlier this year, coming sort of full circle to the end of the story, Salesforce, we just announced Salesforce acquired the company. And so now I have the great pleasure of being on the team here at Salesforce.
And, you know, selling your business is something very few founders even usually do, right? It's kind of a rare thing to sell your company. What did you learn from that experience and like from about the acquisition process?
Well, Vlad, going back to what I said earlier, it really feels like a full circle moment. Let me tell you a bit about how it happened and then maybe some of the learnings we had on the way as well. So, I started this company in 2022. Marc, who's the CEO of Salesforce, was one of our early investors and an incredible mentor to me through this journey. And Salesforce actually eventually became one of our big customers for the company. And earlier this year in 2025, we had raised another round of funding, and Salesforce Ventures had been part of that round of funding. And as part of it, pretty soon after, we got some acquisition interest from other parties, and eventually decided that Salesforce was the right partner for us because we shared a lot of the core values, one. But two, fundamentally, I think the platform and scale that Agentforce provides, we have over 12,000 customers today, was an incredible opportunity to scale up rapidly the technology that we had built. Now, acquisitions are all very different. I think in our case, some of the learnings that I've had are one, culture really matters. Like cultural fit is incredibly important. You Salesforce has core values around trust. I would say Salesforce is also a very customer obsessed company, and both of those were true for my last startup, MoonHub, as well. And those are things that mattered a lot. That in sort of feeling like I personally would love to be in this environment, but also our team would love to be in this environment, right, Vlad? And so those, I think cultural fit is it's hard to underestimate, but it's very important in my experience. And then the second is going through that process. You also learn after the process, like as a founder, you have to go through an identity shift. I didn't appreciate this as much, but um, you go from being a founder of your own company to really helping operate in a much larger organization, and that's been a very exciting transition in the journey for me personally.
Can you tell us more about some of the products that you're currently working on at Salesforce and like some specific use cases of those products? So that way I want the viewers to fully understand how they can benefit from Agentforce.
Sure. I love to talk about our product. So I would say the North Star of Agentforce is enabling our customers to become agentic enterprises. Now, what is an agentic enterprise? Um, at the core, it's about helping businesses realize real business value by deploying AI agents at scale. So when I think about Agentforce, for example, we just had Dreamforce, our annual conference last week. Dreamforce was one of our big sort of unveils was Agentforce 360. And Agentforce 360 is a platform that enables anybody to build agents effectively, really based on the learnings we've had from our customers over the past year on what it takes, not just to build an MVP, but to build an agent that can actually scale up in production repeatedly and consistently with trust for customers. So some of the product areas, that our team works on, we release a brand new builder, which is an experience that allows anybody to really easily build an agent, even if you're not technical. We release voice, so you can build voice agents. And these use cases span, I said earlier, 12,000 customers. It's everything from companies like Pepsi, companies like Lennar in the home improvement space. We have companies like Pandora in the jewelry space, OpenTable in the dining space, Adecco, in the recruiting space. So many more, 1-800 accountant in sort of the account and tax prep space. Um, it's every one of these customer stories for us is like an opportunity to better understand how we can help scale products and agents for those customer use cases.
So I can clearly see and understand the, let's say, customer support agents. So that way you can build an agent that can automate a lot of your customer support. That's kind of clear for me. I can also see how maybe you can build a sales agent, right, that does calls and prospecting type of stuff. So this way you can automate some of your, what you call, SDR type of work. Are there like other common use cases for agents aside for these two, which is because those make sense, right?
Sure.
But what other use cases of agents are
I
people
love this
building?
question. It's such a great question. I had the same exact question, Vlad, when I first joined Salesforce. Um, the short answer is yes, we support a variety of use cases outside of sales and service for Agentforce. I'll give you an example. Adecco is the largest recruiting agency in the world. And Adecco builds an agent with Agentforce that enables them to screen candidates that land on their website when no recruiters are online. So during off hours, if you want to find a job with Adecco, you would land on their website, talk to an Agentforce agent, and basically be pre-screened for opportunities. And this, at scale, Adecco is matching millions of opportunities and job seekers to those opportunities every single year. That's just one example in the recruiting space. And, with Adecco, about 90% of those conversations we handle fully autonomously for them, off hours for their candidates. That's Adecco. OpenTable, dining, like answering basic dining questions, FAQs. We have a lot of use cases. Sales and service, of course, are big ones for us, but those are not the only ones that our customers engage us for.
How long does it, because it's cool that you're mentioning you can build an AI agent without being technical. That's really cool and really useful. But how long does it typically take Like, what's the average time it takes a business, right, from the time they decide they want to build an AI agent to the time that it's live in production? Like, what does that time typically look like?
It can be a matter of 3 weeks. And this is one thing that I am incredibly proud of for the work that the team has done. Um, we have a brand new builder experience. So, two of the learnings that we've had for building agents. The first is in order to build successful agents at scale, you need to be able to involve everyone in the agent building process. So, what we found for the most successful customers are it's not just their IT teams or their developers that are building agents. They also involve, if it's a service agent, their customer service managers, their subject matter experts, and they have the business leader buy-in to make the agent successful. That's why we released this brand new Agentforce Builder product, which makes it possible for you to actually write an agent in just natural language. I'd love to show it to you one day, Vaught. It's like a document, and you can just write, just like you write in a Google Doc, and you can build an agent from it. It's very cool. The other observation we had is we have this thing called Agentforce Script, which is customers need the ability to have more controllable behavior for their agents. And if you just call an LLM, that's not possible today. So we introduced this thing called Agentforce Script that gives you more control, more predictability into behaviors, so that if you have a retirement agent and your retirement agent, say, needs to handle a transfer, it always verifies your customer's identity before it does that process for you. Um, those are all, some examples of where we see opportunity right now for building agents.
How about the size of businesses who could benefit from this? Because I think some folks, right, some entrepreneurs, some businesses, they might say, oh, building AI agents is only for big companies. That's what some folks might say. They might say it's complicated, it's for big companies. But to me, it just sounds like even if you have a smaller business with 20 employees, 50 employees, 100 employees, they should also build those agents, right, to automate so much of that work, right?
It's Our customers range from small startups all the way to large enterprises. And that's the really cool thing. So, on the small startup side, we have companies like Engine. They're a early stage company. They're actually one of our pilots for voice agents right now. But what's really exciting about these AI agents is just because you're a small company by headcount doesn't mean you're a small user of AI, right? So, like Engine, for example, can process millions of interactions every single year, even though it's a small startup. And we also have, of course, the big enterprises of the world, excuse me, uh, the Pepsis, the Fortune 500s, the large enterprise customers, the Finairs, airlines, like large enterprises that have been around for, decades in the case of Finnair, that are also adopting agents. And the power of the platform is really about enabling all these different use cases for the range and spectrum of needs that all these SMBs all the way to enterprises have.
And what metric would you personally look at in terms of basically what metric would you like to see go up? Like, what's your one metric at Salesforce that you see as success? Because there's so many different ones. You can have customers who sign up for your agents, customers who deploy. Like, what's the one metric that you would say, this metric shows that you did great?
I just had a conversation with my team around this last week. The An important metric for us is the number of sessions that our agents engage in at scale. So if you look across all of our customers, right, how many sessions are we really driving through Agentforce agents? Um, this is an important metric because ultimately it's a proxy for what really matters is how much impact and ROI are we driving for our customers, right? Like at the end of the day, our customer success is our success. And I think that's very important when you're building products. And so we want our customers to be successful. Now, when it comes to the idea of this agentic enterprise, every customer's agentic enterprise will look different, right? If you're a recruiting company, it will look totally different from what a FedEx, a transportation and logistics company will look like. So if you think about one universal proxy, I think how many sessions you're having with these agents is a pretty good one for us. We obviously have other ones that we think about, but that is one.
That makes sense too, because it's not like number of customers, because some customers might drop off or not use it, number of sessions, because that means they succeeded with the core use case of your product, which means they built the agents that are delivering those
Yes.
results,
And their
right?
customers are using it. And for many of those customers, right, it's a very tight correlation with how much work the agent is doing for them. Um, I OpenTable, for example, is one of our customers. We handle 70% of their inquiries on their website today through Agentforce agents fully autonomously, right? So those are the customer success managers now who can basically manage these agents without having to handle all of these inquiries themselves.
And what's also really interesting about your experience is that you're a tech startup founder who sold your company to Salesforce, and now you're a vice president of AI. And the question I'd like to ask you, because you have depth in this, is what does Salesforce do to still move quickly, right? To still ship code and still be, right, move quickly? Because sometimes companies, when they get big, they become very, very slow, which is what gives many startups the opportunities, right? Because the startups move quickly. So what does Salesforce do to still kind of to move fast and to ship code fast, so that way they don't, bog down by too much bureaucracy?
Vlad, one thing I appreciate about Salesforce is that Mark, the founder, is still the CEO. Um, I saw Mark was on your show earlier as well, Vlad. The ability for Mark to see the opportunity for agents and just basically bring the whole company along on this Agentforce journey in the span of less than a year has been incredible, right? And I think that kind of direction and that kind of focusing of a company, it really takes like a very strong leader to do it. So I appreciate and I really respect Mark for his willingness and ability to do that. Um, and going back to why I joined Salesforce in the first place, like Mark has personally been a mentor of mine. He was an early investor in my last company, and he's someone that I think I've personally learned a lot on this journey as well. So one is the leadership. Uh, the second is when I had the same thoughts, Vlad, when I first started at Salesforce. What I notice is that within Salesforce, Agentforce is a very unique ecosystem where um, it moves really quickly like a startup. And I was very impressed by this. Like, if you just look at the talent that we're attracting on the team, um, just how many uh, PRs we push and how regularly the team releases, it moves quite quickly like a startup. I would actually say right now the challenge for many of our customers and for Agentforce is how fast our customers can actually absorb the technology the team is building. So the team can ship us a lot of incredible features. Another thing that keeps me up at night is like thinking about how do we actually help those companies now absorb the features that we're building.
You mentioned Marc Benioff, and when I interviewed Mark, he mentioned some of the things he learned from Steve Jobs and some of the things he learned from Larry Ellison. And the question I'd like to ask you, what are some things you learned from Marc Benioff?
A lot. I'll share three. So number one is I think Mark really takes customers' success to a whole nother level. And especially in the world of B2B SaaS, I think it's something that um, I've never seen any other leader take it to that level. Like, if you talk to Mark, he can tell you so and so CIO at this Fortune 500, what do they think about the product? What are the features that they need, and like why they love the product or why it's not working for them? And that has been very inspiring for me. And when in my last company, I would try to meet with customers every single day. And at Salesforce, I try to do it as well. Though, sometimes it's more of a weekly kind of thing. It depends on the week. But one is how to really listen to customers and work with customers to drive product. That's number one. Number two is I've Mark really has fostered this incredible culture at Salesforce. And when I say incredible culture at Salesforce, I mean when you start a company, everyone tells you how important talent is. And I saw this with my first company. Like the first 5 people you hire basically dictate the entire fate of the next 50 people that you hire and what they're going to be like. And I think Mark has a really great way of finding talent, nurturing that talent, and then you can tell that he really invests in those people because at Salesforce, I have met so many people who have been there for more than 15 years. And this is really surprising to me, right? Like, and it's not a 1 in 1,000, right? Like, people I work with directly on a daily basis have been at Salesforce for more than 15 years. And that is, I think, really incredible. And I think it's something that I learned from Mark is like, how do you really foster and nurture great talent? Um, and also keep them around and motivated for long periods of time. The third I'll say is I've appreciated Mark's ability to absorb large amounts of information about the world and be very clear in acting on that information when he feels like he needs to make a decision. So, Agentforce is like the classic example of this. When when I started my company, my first company in 2022, most investors had no idea what an AI agent was. This is before ChatGPT, January of 2022. And I remember talking to Mark at the time, and Salesforce was not working on Agentforce at the time, but Mark had so many questions about agents, right? Like, how do you think about it? Like, what are the use cases? What's the business ROI for these things? And Mark was actually the one who at the time said, well, you should consider thinking about them as digital employees. And I was like, huh, that's really good. Like no one knew what an agent was, but everyone knew what a digital employee was, right? And so I think just like his ability to absorb a lot of information and have asking good questions to understand where the market is headed. And then once he has a sense of where the market is headed, be very decisive in how he's going to react. So in the case of Agentforce, right, I think basically Agentforce has been around for about a year. And you can just look at how fast the company has moved around Agentforce, how fast the product has scaled, and I think that's a testament to Mark as well. So um, I could share a lot more, but I think those are the big three things when I think about what I learned from Mark, and I'm very grateful to him. I think a big part of Moon Hub, how I knew that the culture was a good fit was because, of my experiences with Mark and having had conversations with him and really understanding his core values around trust and what it means to build a company that has trust as a value.
And Nancy, you work with so many smart people. You work, people like Marc Benioff. You work with other, I'm sure, so many smart and intelligent folks, so many advisors I'm sure you had. What would you say is the best business advice you've ever received?
Make hard decisions faster. I think if you look at, what ultimately makes leaders successful, I think the ones that are very successful are the ones who are able to recognize when a hard decision needs to be made and execute swiftly on the decision. Um, at MoonHub, for example, we had, as with many startups, we pivoted a lot in the early stages. And I think one of the great lessons one of my investors told me at the time is, you know, it doesn't matter that you have to pivot. Every startup pivots, but you have to make the hard decisions fast. And I think that's really important, whether you're a startup, whether you're in a larger company, but recognizing what those hard decisions are and being willing to make them quickly. I think with AI, especially, how fast everything is moving, just speed of iteration is very important. And um, it's very easy to have be slow down because you aren't able to iterate quickly and make decisions quickly.
And is that the case? Because if you don't make, some of these decisions really quickly, in AI, it's moving so fast that the product might just fall behind? Is it, meaning what's the core reason why making these hard decisions quickly is the key to success? Is it because the innovation is happening so rapidly and the product will just get left behind if it doesn't innovate fast enough?
That's one example. Um, there are so many examples of this, right? And there are a lot of mistakes that I've made myself, right? It can be anywhere from you kept someone on the team for longer than you should have because you didn't, want to make a hard decision of letting them go, right? It could be from a product perspective, spending too much time deciding on what the right product direction to commit to, and in doing so, the next technology wave is already here, and you've now decided on two versions ago of what AI models people are building on. So that's product, right? Um, there's so many variations of this, and I think it's one of those things where when you start to look at the the inputs of a startup, where it's like it's talent, it's your time, it's obviously capital resources, and then the outputs, like at some point you need to output and have great returns for your company, impact in the world, etc. um, what happens in between is a lot of small decisions, and making those decisions quickly, and making the right decisions, I think, is really important.
Well, Nancy, I am so grateful that you came on the show and shared your lessons, shared your journey. Is there anything else you'd like to mention to our viewers before we log off?
Well, first of all, Vlad, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun chatting with you. Check out agentforce.com. I think for everyone out there who is thinking about how, to transform your business, check out Agentforce. I think we'd love to work with you and help you with building your companies into Gen enterprises.
And I'll also put the link to Agentforce, and I'll also put the link to jobs. So this way, as some folks who probably want to work at Salesforce, that way they can also see the jobs you guys have available. Well, Nancy, thank you so much for coming on, and we talk soon.
Thanks, Vlad. Great to see you.